There's a huge appetite for brilliant storytelling, and it's just that people consume different stories in different ways. And for us, it's about how do we meaningfully connect with audiences and fans who are desperate for more content, whether that's behind the scenes content or spin-offs, junket content. So anything we can do to meaningfully connect with fandoms is the most important thing to sort of build the worlds for those shows.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CIM Marketing Podcast. Today, we've got a very special show. We have got Sky with us today, Sky Television. We've got Lucy Johnston, who is Entertainment Marketing Director for Sky and Now TV, and Tim Yao Struthers, who is Head Original Brands at Sky. It is fantastic to have you on. I'm so thrilled to have you on the show. I watch a lot of Sky, that's not a plug, but it just made me think before we came on to the show today, how times have changed. When I grew up, and I'm showing my age here, there were 3 channels. You almost had a captive audience as long as the household had a television. I was thinking of how your job as TV execs has changed and marketers in television has changed, that you've now got people not even watching television in the same room, sometimes watching on the move. They've got a vastly greater choice of shows, and marketing these things must be a very different game to it was when I was a kid. What do you think has been the main difference, Lucy, given the massive change in consumer behaviour?
It's a really good question. And I also remember when there were only 3 channels. And I think not only have we moved away to a world where it's so fragmented, whether you're watching, linear TV or different streaming platforms, but we've also moved away from families all gathering in the living room to individuals watching what they want across various different devices and platforms when they want to watch it. So I think really the headline here is that people want flexibility and control, but I think that's a really exciting challenge for us as marketeers. What we want to do is create more of those shared experiences again and really think about how we can cut through with audiences and bring people together in such a fragmented world.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because if you're a sports event, you act as a magnet because it's live and you get people together for that shared experience. If you're a sort of as live or real-time game show, like The Traitors or Love Island or whatever, you can sort of create that to an extent as well by everybody talking about it at the same time as it's broadcast. But you don't have that luxury. So how do you go about creating a shared experience with your fantastic shows?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our content, sometimes people love a box set binge and they don't necessarily want to sit down on a Friday evening at 9 p.m. and want it. They want to watch it when they want. But when you have those big sort of hero shows that you really want to sort of bring everyone together for, I think we think a lot about how we can sort of reflect that in our marketing as well, and bringing together people for sort of big live events, whether that's, premieres or junkets, and sort of connecting with our audiences, through social and making them feel like they're part of that event and giving people that kind of behind the scenes access. We feel like that's a really good way of sort of connecting with audiences and making the show feel bigger than just that particular slot when it airs.
It's using social as well, isn't it? We obviously make a show, but there's so much other content around the show. So whether it's social assets, sometimes there's a podcast, sometimes there's TV specials. So you're right, like sports and like things, big live shows, but often a consumer will discover a show through a social clip, which then they're discussing with their friends, and then they're going off and watching the show and then they'll come back. So the marketing piece involves everything really. It can be social, it can be publicity, how we're showcasing the show on the UIs. The UI is like the front of Sky, when you turn on your TV and you see what's there. So all of these different levers, I think, bring people together to discuss, especially now. And I used to always say the younger audience, but actually it's not the younger audience. Everyone is social. I was on a plane the other day. The lady in front of me she was getting on a bit. She was on TikTok and she was watching clips from a TV show, which I won't name because it's not one of ours. And she was engaging with it. And so the power of social to connect, but then it also drives people to go and view something is super important, and very much what our like overall strategy is that like, okay, people see billboards, but you're very rarely going to have someone comment on a billboard. But what you are going to have them comment on is on a behind the scenes piece, a podcast where they're deep diving into what did he actually mean when he said that in that episode. So companion content is a really important driver for that, what you mentioned as that shared experience, so that people have the opportunity to discuss it on their feeds, I guess.
It's interesting you leaning into social in that way because, you could see it as a competitor. You're the long form, the novel, if you like, to social media's clip, instant gratification. But what you're saying is that you're leaning into those formats. So you're not necessarily seeing YouTube and TikTok as a competitor, but as a collaborator.
You're a collaborator. So if you think about, there's, from an AV point of view, audiovisual, so things like trailers and social clips, we partner daily, if not hourly, with these different platforms so that anyone can have access to a trailer or a clip. So we work very, very closely with all those different platforms, again, to drive awareness for the show with a view to them watching. So it's not seen as a competitor. They're seen as very, very close collaborators. And Lucy and our team and our social team, when we're strategizing how we're going to launch a show, they're often day-long workshops with these different platforms to say, right, what is going to be our approach from their platform point of view? How are we going to launch a trailer? Are we going to do a TikTok live at a premiere? So it's very much, we work hand in hand with those platforms.
And I think going back to what we were saying around, how do you bring people together? I think, as Tim said, we don't see these platforms as competitors. There's a huge appetite for brilliant storytelling. And it's just that people consume different stories in different ways. And for us, it's about how do we meaningfully connect with audiences and fans who are desperate for more content, whether that's behind the scenes content or spin-offs, junket content. So anything we can do to meaningfully connect with fandoms is the most important thing to sort of build the worlds for those shows.
Well, it's something, the BTS piece, my background is theatrical, so I worked at Universal Pictures for a very, very long time, too long to even say the number, then you know my age, but we had a huge focus on behind the scenes content. I think one thing that Sky, we have a dedicated on-set capture team, so they will be on set capturing all the behind the scenes, and actually that content performs really well because, and I think Lucy mentioned, you can watch a show, but with anything, whether you're reading a book, you want to know the background story, and that BTS allows the consumer, the fan, to enter the world. They will see something. So Day of the Jackal, Eddie Redmayne and Lashana Lynch, we had a lot of behind the scenes, them getting ready and all of that sorts of stuff. And the content performed amazingly well, because the thing about content and entertainment is, for us, we are deep in it every single day. We're seeing it from before pre-greenlight to like goes on TV and hopefully gets awards. But not everyone else can see that behind the scenes of how a show was made, how the relationships between the directors and the producers. So the BTS piece is understandably super successful because it just sort of opens the door to the show that our customer or consumer is loving. And again, building that fandom, especially for shows that are returning. If a consumer feels like they're super engaged and feel like they've had that inside look, they're going to talk about it more, and they're going to engage and they're going to watch it.
That's fascinating. So other than the Day of the Jackal, go on, share some state secrets. What have been your most successful grabs, your most successful hooks, grabbing the eyes and ears of the audience in this crowded marketplace?
I think there is still like a real excitement and desire from consumers to see the kind of big traditional stunts and sort of experiential activations. And I think that in a way, COVID has sort of helped that because people were, separate for so long. I think this idea of kind of bringing people together again and kind of bringing to life the worlds of our shows are really exciting for fans. We had a really brilliant stunt for the launch of Sweet Pea Series 1 last year, starring Ella Purnell. And one of the sort of iconic elements of the world of the show is the Gazette, which she works for. And we brought that Gazette to Waterloo station. And actually, Ella Purnell herself came down to the station. She didn't make herself known, but she posted it on social media. And I think what was great about that was not only were the fans and people who were excited to watch the show able to interact with this piece of the show, but also it's really important for us that we're building really strong relationships with the talent that we work with on the show. We know how important it is to them, and we know how important it is for us to make sure we're marketing it in a way that feels representative of the show. And it's great when you have your talent come down and support those big activations. When I think back in the last sort of 6 months, that feels like a big standout moment for us.
The other thing that we lead into a lot, and actually it hasn't really been a major thing in TV, definitely in the theatrical world as a thing, is also music. So shows always have a title sequence. So the opening titles, there's always a track. So one thing, and again, going back to where I was before, we did it a lot. So we would work with Billie Eilish on No Time to Die or Pharrell on Despicable. It's almost like a separate vertical that you can tap into. So when you have a track, and we also did it on the Day of the Jackal as well, we had an artist called Celeste, a British artist. She released a track, which was the title sequence track, and she then performed that track on Graham Norton. She was on Radio 1. She did loads and loads of press. So it gave us almost an entirely separate campaign, but all laddering back to the show. But it gives you exposure in places that we wouldn't necessarily have a presence on Spotify or Apple Music for a TV show. But by releasing a single, we were able to do all of that. There's lots of different levers, where the experiential, the music piece. And I think as at Sky, our shows are generally like top tier. There's big talent. And so artists want to be associated with those shows. So it's something that we're doing. There's a show coming up that we're actually in negotiations with an artist right now. And that show doesn't TX for another 8 or 9 months, but we're already looking at how can we use that artist, and it'll benefit them as well, to elevate the show.
It's interesting. People have been listening to this, or I certainly listen to these, think, because there's no set formula. This is really creative ideas. Where does it all start? What's the seed? What's the creative process that leads to these very diverse outcomes?
Lucy and I's teams are separable. We work probably every 20 minutes with each other, where we're talking a lot. So we work incredibly upstream. So I sit within a team who are the commissioners and the exec producers of the show. So we're across shows very, very early. And one of the first pieces of work that we do is we create something called a show playbook. It's essentially the overall global strategy for a show. So we will work alongside editorials, so the commissioners and the exec producers within Sky, but also the production, the indie that we will work with who are making the show. And we align with them on what is the positioning of this show. And positioning essentially can be 1 or 2 sentences that describe the show. It generally will include what the genre is, what the narrative is, the tone, and some of the character. I mean, the deck can be 20 pages or it can be 40 pages, and that is a deep dive into what this show is, but with a marketing and comms, so Marcom's lens on it. So the main thing is the positioning, but then we'll go into the brand pillars. What are the 5 hooks of this show that are marketable? Those can be anything from talent to themes to why now. And we will also look at audiences. We'll also look at what the show is and what the show isn't. So when the teams are briefing to agencies or internally, they have a very clear picture of what this show is. Because the one thing that I think happens a fair bit overall is that people aren't close enough to the show until much, much later. So things are briefed in, and then when you actually watch the show or the film, well, actually that doesn't work. So we work very, very hard on creating a deck. It looks very pretty, lots of nice pictures and all of that sort of thing. And that is shared with all of Lucy's team, all of publicity, every team that will have touched the show, both in Sky, but also with our broadcast partners around the world. And that is used as a foundational tool to then market. The go-to-market teams, both within Sky and externally, will use that to build their local marketing strategy or local publicity strategy. And everything sort of ladders up to that. And we stay very, very close to what that global strategy and brand piece. I think the other important thing is we treat each show as an individual brand. So it isn't something that we are going, right, we've got a show, we'll see you in 10 months when the show is finished. We're working even before that show has started shooting. And sometimes it iterates, sometimes the positioning may change as we start to see the show, but it really is an early piece of work that will be seen right up until that show TXs.
And as Tim said, the playbook becomes your sort of central point of truth for what the show is. So my team look after the go-to-market campaigns for Sky and Now. And what we will do is take that playbook, that will be the foundation for our brief. And I guess the next most important step is, who are the audience? Who are the fans? Like, who are they? Where are they? Like, what are their behaviors? Where can we find them? And what we will do is pull together a brief that goes to our media agency and our creative agency. And that becomes the kind of first kickoff point for that campaign. And I think it's probably worth saying there's two kind of really important steps that gets us to those big, exciting ideas, as you mentioned before. The first is, as part of that creative process, we'll develop with our creative team a creative platform, and that becomes your sort of creative springboard for whether that's like the social agency or an experiential agency or whoever it is that's working on this particular show and this campaign. That becomes their creative springboard. So that's really important. And then the other thing that we do, which I think is really brilliant, is we have what we call ambition sessions, and we bring together all the teams working on a show. We might play the first episode, we might have a Q&A with talent, and it's a really inspiring opportunity for everyone to hear what the show is, watch the show, and then get together and think about just blue sky thinking ideas. All of these things together create a really inspiring starting point for anyone working on the shows.
For us as well as Sky, our shows have a global life. So Lucy's team are working for the UK launch, but as we are like the originating market of a show, the work that Lucy's team does and the work that my team does is always shared on a global level as well. The playbook is that strategic piece. And then we will also work very closely with broadcast partners around the world and say, this is the campaign that we are putting together. Not that they're going to directly follow, but it often gives them really good inspiration. And as we know, it doesn't matter if you're in the UK, you can see what's happening in any country around the world. So our big ambition has been over the last few years is really to have these global brands. So there's consistency around the world, not just in terms of creative, how the poster looks or the trailer, but actually the messaging. How are individual markets around the world talking about this show? Because the last thing you want is to have this 100 different messages around the world. And that's a big part, more the brands team that I sit in that work with. So if we have a US partner, we will have regular meetings with them. We'll be sharing our insights. We'll be sharing, we're going to do this experiential. We're going to do this. And often we get alignment and work very closely with them. And I think from a TV standpoint, we are often working with 20, 30, 40, 100, 200 broadcasters. So for us to be able to share that strategic thinking with them, I think, is super beneficial. So by the time we're all TXing, and we always ideally like to look for day and date, that isn't always possible. But what we will see is a consistent campaign around the world and messaging. And I think that really helps, especially when you're looking at social. You're not seeing wildly different marketing campaigns for the same show.
Do you ever go back to the old school, big physical events, roll out the red carpet?
I think there's a role for traditional marketing and digital to work hand in hand. I think they can really sort of complement each other. And I think actually it's really important to be doing both. And as we talked about before, I think there's absolutely a role for those big, old school red carpet events, experiential stunts that really kind of drive that emotion, that quality, that credibility. We love a big red carpet premiere. Not only do they make the sort of launch of a show feel like a really big moment, but as we've talked about before, they're also a really great opportunity to connect with audiences through social, to make them feel like they're also experiencing this event just, on their phones, on their sofas. I think with the sort of incredible progression of digital and innovation in that space has led to really exciting opportunities for different ways that we can connect with audiences and fans. Personalization has come on sort of leaps and bounds, and being able to connect with people at the right time, at the right moment, and with the right message. For us, that's also a really important part of how we're getting audiences' attention, because it's a fight for attention at the moment. And you've got to be able to cut through, and you can cut through with a big, bold premiere, but you can also cut through in a really personal space when someone's just sitting on their sofa and on their phone.
We spoke about, Day of the Jackal, but it's a really good example. So for us, the Day of the Jackal is our biggest ever launch, whether original or not. And I think our focus and thought for that was, we want to launch this as a global show, a global brand. And so we lent a little bit into how the theatrical world do. We did a world tour. We went to New York, we went to London, we went to Madrid, we went to Rome, and we went to Berlin. And that's very much a theatrical, you do a world tour. But what that does is communicate to the consumer, this is a really big show. There's scale to it. And as you saw these different tour stops, the Daily Mail, for example, and social, they were all sharing pictures of all the different events. And it felt, even though it was Peacock in the US and Sky in Europe, it all felt super connected. And we had coverage for those different premieres for about a month, if not more. And there were these beats, seeing Eddie and Lashana in Rome and Berlin, and it made a really big impact. And our premiere in London was on the South Bank. We took the singing songs of the Royal Festival Hall. That was the entire red carpet. It felt like a huge, huge, huge event. And again, I think that it sort of sent a message to consumer, but also actually to press, that this is a show we need to cover. And they did. As Lucy said, the big events still have huge, huge currency.
How do you measure the impact of big events and digital campaigns? How do you measure the impact it has beyond what it would otherwise have got just by being a great show?
There's lots of different metrics that we look at, some of which we can share. So viewing obviously is important, awareness is important, but it can be hard for things like awareness. It can be sort of hard to quantify that cleanly. But what we do try and look at is the full picture. So we look at PR coverage, we look at levels of social engagement. So we can see, how our assets are tracking on different channels. We also look at social sentiment as well. As Tim said, we look at talkability. And actually, what these metrics help us do is also be reactive as well. So once a show has launched, what we don't just do is launch and leave. It's really important for us to think about, what are people saying about the show? What are they really enjoying? Is there a particular character that we can see people are talking about, or a moment? Let's lean into that and clip that up on social, and we can look to push that out. And then also in season, we can look at what sort of critics are saying about it, and we can use critical acclaim to sort of bolster our campaigns as well. So it's really important for us that once a show has launched, we are measuring the sort of success of it and thinking about how we can be reactive to that.
I think also on a more sort of personal level, and I've seen this with quite a lot of shows recently, when your friends start to talk to you about it, going back to Day of the Jackal, I remember being in the Sky office, but just around and about, and genuinely, I kept on hearing people talking about the show. So you know you've done something right. And actually, like you said, first of all, you need a brilliant show, but without the marketing and all of those pieces, the publicity and social, the awareness isn't there. So I think for me, like if I hear out on the street people talking about it, I know that we've done a good job.
How do you keep everything fresh? Not just think, well, that was successful. Let's do something similar.
I think from a marketing perspective, as soon as you put, we want bold innovation on the plan, agencies immediately sort of roll their eyes because, you always want something innovative on your plan. And we're very clear when we do that as to kind of what the expectation is that we mean from an innovation perspective. Is that we want to see the use of AI, or we want a big, bold stunt, or we want to use personalization on this plan. But I think that what helps you in our world, what helps keep things fresh and relevant, which is what audiences want. Firstly, making sure that we're staying on top of trends. It's really important for us that we're staying on top of trends in social media. What are people talking about? But also really being in the minds of the fans. When you work on a show, you need to know it inside out. You need to know the characters inside out. You need to know the plot, the storylines. You need to be in Reddit, sort of seeing what the fan theories are. And I think that that's when you can really tap into those insights that fans are really connecting with. And that's when you can come up with those brilliant ideas.
The fans are the stakeholders as well, because so organic talkability is something you can't force it to happen. So you have to feed the fans. So we've got a show called Gangs of London, and they're very consistent fans on that who are always wanting to know when the next show is coming, who's coming. So we created, and it's not a new thing, a specific Instagram account for Gangs of London, which is always on. In between seasons, we will be feeding updates on the next season, but then also looking back at the previous seasons. So bringing them on the journey is super important, because they are the ones that will talk for you when you don't have a marketing campaign in play. Again, theatrical, there's huge franchises. So Fast and Furious, all these different things, Bond, and the people who will turn their cars into a Fast and Furious car or name their children after a character. And that fandom you cannot buy, but you have to feed it. You have to be able to give them access, which I think is something, again, we are call it life cycle, but how you're continuing engaging with fans, especially in between seasons. Because sometimes with TV, it might be 2 years before the next season comes. So you don't want those fans to forget. So you must keep them engaged. And that's not easy, because you can't just repurpose everything. You have to really find new and exciting hooks that they're going to discuss.
It's hard work, isn't it? Creating originals. I mean, some people will look at it and think, well, television, you can run a television channel, you can run a television company without actually making any of your own stuff. Some people might listen to this. It is fascinating. It's an amazing creative process. But boy, oh boy, what a Herculean task that these guys have got making originals. It must give you a commercial benefit. Otherwise, presumably, you wouldn't do it.
For us, Sky Originals is our original brand. For us, it's about creating the best possible content that for the Sky customer. And I think as a British company, we commission for the Sky customer. And your point was, how do you keep it fresh? We have an amazing editorial team, and you would have seen the shows that have come out over the years, from Chernobyl to Day of the Jackal to a show that we have called War that's upcoming. So I think it is about making sure that the best possible content is available. And when you're creating originals, it's been led from here. So,
and I think new original content, it's great for the customer, but also the right show can bring in new customers as well, which is great. But equally, you know, when you have returning series where audiences have already fallen in love with the characters and the world, you know, we want to make sure that we're really getting behind those, and it keeps people coming back as well. So really, it's just about creating stories that people genuinely care about. And that's the most important thing for us.
That's fantastic. I mean, we've got a lot of people listen to the show all the way through their careers. Particularly some of our younger audience will be listening to this and thinking, that is the sort of thing that I would love to do later in my career. If they want to get there, if you've got any tips for them, one thing that you could pass on as a sort of state secret.
I have more than one, but I'll be quick. The key thing is you must love content.
Yes.
Because if you are, like, you can be a brilliant marketeer or a publicist or a social strategist or a creative advertising person. If you don't really love content, I'm not saying you have to love every show because no one does, but for us to be able to connect with an audience, you have to have an emotional feeling about something, and that's how you connect. So for me, if you don't love content, and that can be music, film, whatever, because the job can be hard, but the payoff of seeing your campaign is really true to a show because you know that show is really great. And then the other thing is, I think, and we've lent into a little bit, like, fandom is very important. You have to understand the audience and you have to watch not just the content that you're working on, other people's content, the campaign they're doing, what is going on in culture, what is on the news, because in order to resonate, you have to be there and understand what people are thinking and feeling at that moment in time.
Yeah, and I would agree with both of those. And content has always been a passion for me. I think if you want to get into marketing, I guess more generally, and perhaps you have a passion, it might not be content, it might be something else. I would say my advice would be to be endlessly curious. So whether that's with people that you meet, you know, be curious about culture, be curious about what makes audiences tick or fans tick. And because really marketing is about understanding human behavior and observing people. And I guess the more you observe and the more you explore, the better you will be. And I think, therefore, if you're endlessly curious, you'll say yes to opportunities and you'll say yes to continuing to learn. So I think I always say this to my team when we have new people start out in the team, just ask questions and be curious. And I think that can go a really long way.
Great insights. Thank you very much indeed. That's Lucy Johnston, who is Entertainment Marketing Director from Sky and Now TV, and Tim Yao-Struthers, who is the Head of Original Brands at Sky. That's all the time we have for this episode of the CIM Marketing Podcast. You can find detailed show notes and links to additional resources mentioned by our guests at cim.co.uk. If you enjoyed this episode and find it helpful, please consider supporting the show by leaving a rating and review. It really helps grow our reach. The CIM Marketing Podcast is hosted by me, Ben Walker, and produced for CIM by Brindley Walker. No relation. Thanks again for tuning in to the CIM Marketing Podcast. We'll catch you next time.
CIM training courses cover all marketing subjects and provide you with the confidence to drive real results. Choose now from our comprehensive learning portfolio on the CIM website under Learn and Develop. The contents and views expressed by individuals in the CIM Marketing Podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of the companies they work for.